Hi. Dark Souls is one of the most influential games in recent years. Without exaggeration, the legendary series FromSoftware has had such a profound impact on gamers that it spawned an entire Souls-like genre. Since the release of the first installment in 2011, dozens of games with similar mechanics have been released. So, if challenges don't scare you and, on the contrary, spark your interest and desire to test your own abilities, if casual games only bring boredom, and in your opinion only true hardcore deserves the attention of a real gamer, then in this list, you will definitely find something to play. Here, in no particular order, I have gathered both popular and lesser-known PC games whose gameplay is closely aligned with the Dark Souls series. I'll start with the very recent, Lords of the Fallen 2023. This captivating sequel expands on the original, revealing its story centuries after the first installment. The game maintains the essence of the Souls-like genre, offering dark fantasy with diverse bosses and challenging levels. The action unfolds in a world conquered by a demon god where the Dark Crusaders must prevent his resurrection. The core mechanic involves using a magical lantern to transition between dimensions, each with its unique features. The game provides a broad arsenal, including quick and powerful attacks, dodges, blocking, and even the option to use ranged weapons. Special attention is given to the system of phantom damage, creating dynamic battles where caution plays a crucial role. Another significant element is the transition to the second dimension, where the lantern not only reveals new locations but also aids in battles using the soul flay technique. The plot revolves around a ritual to resurrect the demon god, with additional quests influencing the narrative's development. The multiplayer mode allows encounters with the spectral forms of other players or collaboration for cooperative play. Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. The same folks behind Dark Souls realized that fans had their fill of the 3DS installments and decided it was time to release something new. However, they didn't want to stray too far from the familiar mechanics that fans loved. Thus, Sekiro was born, a wild action game set in medieval Japan with a touch of mysticism. The protagonist is a samurai on a mission to rescue his kidnapped master. Unlike the typical RPG-style leveling system, the hero learns and gradually becomes more controllable, improving health, posture, and attack power by confronting defeated bosses. The main combat feature revolves around the emphasis on parrying. Timely pressing of the correct key opens up the opportunity to unleash a series of swift and highly painful strikes on the enemy. Otherwise, tackling another boss would be a lengthy and challenging endeavor. Remnant. In these games, we'll have to set aside the sword and pick up a rifle. The developers took a bold step by incorporating Dark Souls elements into a third-person shooter. It's a post-apocalyptic shooter with a focus on ranged combat, and the gameplay is geared towards a group of 3 players who must explore procedurally generated worlds invaded by monsters. Victory over each boss brings valuable resources for crafting or new weapons. The recently released Remnant 2 takes all the fantastic ideas laid out in the first part and refines them. Remnant 2 unfolds several decades after the events of Remnant from the Ashes, returning players to Ward 13 to continue the fight against the Root and threats beyond. It remains a third-person shooter with light melee elements. Overall, memorable bosses, high difficulty, and a focus on cooperative play set Remnant apart from other games. Bloody Spell. An excellent indie Souls-like game set in a Chinese setting. Visually, the game looks impressive. It features an interesting weapon proficiency leveling mechanic. For example, the longer you use swords, the more moves and techniques you unlock for them. The game incorporates kung fu battles with combo attacks and skill progression. Before the weapons reveal all their potential abilities, you need to spend some time using them. The main feature is that after death, the locations, enemies, traps, and loot change, enhancing replayability. Neverinth. Another Souls-like game with roguelike elements from an Asian studio where you can play as one of 3 Valkyries. Initially, only a sword and shield are available, but as you progress through the locations, you can find other weapon sets. In addition to the primary weapons, various items are hidden on almost every location. Healing potions, explosive potions, throwing spears, shurikens, and items that enhance the character's attributes. Levels are generated randomly, including the placement of loot. The controls are convenient, and the combat is dynamic. Code Vein. To be honest, it is customary to compare all games with complex combat mechanics to Dark Souls, where inattentiveness in a duel leads to significant challenges. Code Vein is no exception. However, in other respects, the game is unique. In terms of lore, we are in a post-apocalyptic world where vampires have nearly eradicated humanity. We play as the young rebel Lewis, who wants to feed his own kind and save people. Overall, the plot is interesting and the Japanese are adept at captivating storytelling. There are many interesting mechanics, such as classes that can be changed at any moment. When you start the game, the first thing that catches your eye is an extensive character editor where literally everything can be customized. Hair length, wings, horns, and the like. Thanks to this stylistic approach, the game has been dubbed Anime Souls, although the vampire attributes and blood-based attacks rather turn Code Vein into a Bloodborne set in the backdrop of post-apocalyptic Tokyo. Battles unfold almost like in DS. You need to dodge, block, slash, and use magic. The main difference lies in the talent system, allowing the creation of unique combinations and builds tailored to a specific combat style. Necropolis. This is an adventure role-playing action game where players must find their way out of a dungeon teeming with monsters and traps, generated procedurally either solo or in cooperation with 3 friends. What connects this project with Dark Souls games is the combat system, which simultaneously leans towards realism, hardcore gameplay, and dynamism. A wide selection of weapons, realistic physics, significant damage, dodges, and blocks, all these elements are present here. The game is very hardcore, lacking save points even akin to those in Dark Souls. So, making a mistake means starting the game from the very beginning. Nioh. The action of these games unfolds in medieval Japan during a period of civil war, and the enemies include not only ordinary soldiers, bandits, and other human-like foes, but also various demons from traditional Japanese folklore. The main character is not a knight in armor, but a samurai with a katana. The combat system is reminiscent of Dark Souls, but it is more swift, containing 3 combat stances that determine a set of strikes, allowing for hurricane-like combinations and unique techniques. Another significant difference from other Souls-like games is the loot system, more akin to the Diablo series. There is a plethora of weapons and armor, requiring constant changes. Each situation requires its approach, and the right choice of weapons and stance significantly simplifies life. Shattered. A role-playing action platformer set in a dark world where players solve puzzles in large locations, battle bosses, craft items, and level up their character. The game features intricate levels filled with various traps, and each stage includes one of 12 bosses. The unique aspect of the game lies in combining 2D and 3D perspectives. There is a standard open 3D world showcasing complex gameplay and an emphasis on exploration. However, some areas are designed as 2D platformers with hidden puzzles, along with traditional 3-dimensional boss battles. The Surge. This game series is for those who always dreamed of transferring the Dark Souls gameplay from medieval fantasy to the distant future. People have created exoskeletons endowed with superhuman abilities and strength. As a result, players must use such an exoskeleton in battle, without which it is impossible to defeat giant robots. The combat mechanics are deliberate, providing room for tactical decisions depending on the chosen weapon. Strikes can be targeted at specific parts of an enemy's body, weakening or severing them. By picking up special parts from defeated enemies, you can upgrade your own weapons and armor. Overall, the Surge may differ in setting and some elements, like equipment crafting, but its roots still grow from the Dark Souls series. Sinner, Sacrifice for Redemption. Here, players take on the role of a deceased soldier who must confront dangerous and horrifying bosses, 7 of which embody mortal sins. The bosses in the game are challenging, requiring players to find their own tactics for each, and winning on the first try is almost impossible. The game itself is short, devoid of regular enemies, only featuring battles with bosses accessible through portals in the central location. There is almost no storyline, and how the hero behaves in battle with each boss determines the game's progression and leads to one of the numerous endings. Wulong Fallen Dynasty. Set in China during the Three Kingdoms era, this game incorporates elements of dark fantasy, introducing dragons and other mystical creatures. Players can use supernatural abilities in addition to conventional weapons. The game's storyline follows a militia soldier's journey from an unknown fighter to a legendary hero. The gameplay offers a deep and multifaceted combat system with a standout 5-element system providing cool elemental spells. Additionally, players engage in battles alongside interesting characters. Ashen. Released in 2018 by a New Zealand studio, Ashen became one of those games that almost entirely replicated the main features of the Dark Souls series. Although not without a set of innovations such as offline and online modes and a minimalist style, one of the main obstacles for players is the absence of lighting. Many dungeons require some light source, keeping one hand constantly occupied with a lantern, thereby reducing the hero's combat effectiveness. Ashen features many elements we love in Dark Souls, from the combat system to location exploration. Overall, it's the same but simpler, lighter, and more budget-friendly. Blasphemous. This is a series of 2D action platformers with a dark gothic atmosphere reminiscent of Dark Souls. These are the kind of games that leave a lasting impression. Beautiful locations, a dark and unusual world, and excellent musical accompaniment make them stand out. The design of enemies is impressive, requiring a unique approach to each foe. Spectacular executions for each evil entity come with their own animations. The world's description is particularly noteworthy, with each item, skill, and ability having its own legend. Overall, Blasphemous is an atmospheric, dark, melancholic, and beautiful platformer that will make both the hero and the player suffer, as the game is so hardcore that some may struggle to find the exit menu or how to scroll through item descriptions. Dark Devotion. An excellent representative of 2D Souls-like games that breaks all the genre's principles. Yes, there are dodges and blocks, but there is no attack parrying in the game at all. Moreover, at first glance, it seems to be a platformer, but there are no jumps. In terms of the story, a young nun sets out to explore an ancient underground temple to honor her deity. The path is full of dangers, and the further the heroine delves into the temple's depths, the more she doubts her own faith. The bosses here evoke horror, each unique, and of course, each requires its approach. As for the lore, we discover it through the library and notes found in the levels. Salt and Sanctuary and Salt and Sacrifice. This is a series of 2D action RPGs that combine 2D platforming and role-playing progression with hero customization. Players decide whether to take a sword and shield, a bow, a magical staff, or a massive two-handed axe. Each option opens up a separate set of attacks. You can also equip your belt with various auxiliary items such as bottles and throwing knives, but increased equipment weight reduces the hero's mobility and stamina recovery speed. In our arsenal, there are over 600 types of weapons, armor, spells, and items that can be upgraded, improved, and collected to create your own versatile build. Death's Gambit Afterlife. This is a reissue of the original Death's Gambit. In the new version, the combat system has become more responsive, and the character's arsenal of weapons and abilities has expanded. Additionally, 10 new levels and 5 challenging bosses have been introduced. Embark on a journey to the heart of Cyrodiil to challenge the immortals and cleanse their souls. In this grim world, we will seek the key to immortality. You can choose from 7 playable classes, each with over 100 talents in the skill tree. For enthusiasts of challenging battles, there are a total of 20 bosses, each with its mechanics and behavior patterns. In short, you won't be bored here. Dead Cells. At first glance, this game doesn't resemble Dark Souls, bright colors, and a 2D perspective. but after the 10th death on the first level, their similarity gradually becomes apparent. Here, you can die from a single blow, and after death, you respawn at the very beginning, even if you had a showdown with the final boss. The game features numerous artifacts and weapons that, when upgraded, make you stronger with each playthrough. Each location has branching paths, usually indicating easy and difficult routes. The more challenging the level, the stronger you can upgrade your character. So trying to find an easy way isn't always the right approach. Titan Souls, a game about boss battles with a unique feature. Both the character and the boss have only one hit point each. But in reality, it's not as simple as it might seem. The boss is covered by multiple barriers that you need to break through to hit its vulnerable spot. The game consists of a set of arenas with dozens of different bosses. Bosses behave entirely differently. In terms of difficulty, the game resembles Dark Souls. The gameplay is quite simple. We have a bow, a single arrow, and a roll using which we must kill all the bosses in the arenas. The arrow can be pulled back, but it takes some time. Hollow Knight. There's an opinion that this game is more of a Metroidvania than a Souls-like, but isn't Dark Souls a 3D Metroidvania? Be that as it may, the dark atmosphere, benches as resting places, and the need to revisit the location of your death to recover lost items make Hollow Knight a follower of Souls-like games. Even though it lacks certain Dark Souls elements, it retains many others, such as dangerous enemies and penalties for death. All of this allows you to experience the game as a full-fledged Souls-like project. Looking forward to the sequel. Hellpoint. What if we move the action of Dark Souls into space? We get Hellpoint. It's a quite decent action game that doesn't quite reach the level of our main competitor, but provides enjoyment for genre enthusiasts. Moreover, Hellpoint helps distract from the setting of the medieval era. Here, we find ourselves on an abandoned space station infested with monsters and their gods. The story, like in other games of the genre, is revealed bit by bit. We encounter the same challenging fights, progression only in specially designated areas, endless gear searching, and numerous locations. Unworthy, a 2D Metroidvania in black and white, without jumps but with a vast map oriented towards battles. You play as a resurrected warrior trying to escape from the underworld. The plot is delivered through rare dialogues and inscriptions on statues. After killing enemies, we can take on their sins, which can later be used to acquire items from traders. Almost all weapons are obtained from defeated bosses. From them, we also receive points to upgrade skills, but you must be very careful in your choices as their quantity is limited. Darksiders 3. The Darksiders series is usually associated with slashers, but in the third installment, the combat system has transformed, becoming much like Dark Souls. Now, the combat system heavily relies on timings, evasion mechanics, and counterattacks. Regular enemies pose a serious threat and become increasingly dangerous as you progress. Bosses are challenging and progression is achieved through collected souls, which players risk losing upon the character's death. The game's story, actually a prequel to the first part, narrates the adventures of Fury, one of the horsemen of the apocalypse. Her task is to find and destroy the 7 deadly sins that have escaped imprisonment in the earthly realm. Thymesia, a role-playing action game set in a kingdom ravaged by plague. Playing as a mysterious character named Corvus, you must harness the power of a destructive disease and use it to strike down dark alchemists whose actions have led to a horrific epidemic. Thymesia allows you to shape your own combat style, enhancing and modifying the protagonist's techniques and weapons. The ability to transform into a crow and shower enemies with sharp feathers adds additional variety to the gameplay. All of this complements an atmosphere of desperation and hopelessness in combination with dark locations. Mortal Shell. Developed by a small team of 15 people, this action RPG is a worthy Souls-like game. It closely resembles its inspiration but introduces unique mechanics such as the shell system and unusual progression. Players will visit a dark fantasy world where it's not clear what is happening, but enemies and weapons are abundant onward. The combat system boasts smooth animations, enemies showcase diversity, and the locations create a compelling atmosphere. If you're looking for something as close to Dark Souls as possible, Mortal Shell will satisfy that desire. However, it's a relatively short adventure. Even a non-hasty playthrough is unlikely to take more than 8 hours. Below. Surprisingly, Below plays entirely differently from Dark Souls despite numerous parallels between the two games. Observing the action from a top-down perspective, you explore a mysterious island, wandering in pitch darkness with only a lantern, delving deeper and encountering hostile monsters, traps, thirst, and hunger. It's more of a survival game with roguelike elements. When a character dies, another takes the stage and can reach the predecessor's corpse to pick up its equipment. Nevertheless, the creative director of the game believes that his creation can be compared to Souls games. There are no hints, and players must figure out all mechanics, whether it's avoiding death in traps, cooking food, or healing the hero. GRIME. This intriguing Metroidvania immerses us in a dark surrealist world where survival is a real challenge due to numerous powerful enemies. However, we have a whole arsenal of living weapons at our disposal that can change their form. For example, you can turn a claw sword into a whip many-legged creature or even change the hero himself by consuming another enemy. The lore is presented similarly to Dark Souls, and at some point, what unfolds on the screen begins to resemble Planescape Torment. However, everything is unique and interesting. In this side-scrolling game, you'll battle enemies in hardcore fights and explore dark lands. There will be various bosses, each serving as a serious test for your combat skills. Tales of Iron. A side-scrolling role-playing adventure where you take on the role of Reggie, the heir to the Rat Throne. The hero must seek the help of allies and save his kingdom from the invasion of warlike frogs. Speaking of similarities to Dark Souls, it's worth noting the dark fantasy setting and a complex combat system that emphasizes parrying and counterattacks. It requires a special approach to each opponent, especially bosses. A wide selection of weapons and armor will help you tailor your builds for different scenarios. However, the decisive factor will be your personal skill. Star Wars Jedi. These are adventure actions set in the Star Wars universe. Here, we'll uncover the story of Cal Kestis, a Padawan who went into hiding after Order 66. Until forced to use the Force, the Empire hunts him down. Games set in the Star Wars universe are rare. From Dark Souls, the combat system is borrowed, focusing on defense and dodging. In other words, the gamer can't go around like a Jedi master defeating everyone effortlessly. Each opponent requires a unique approach, and if a mistake is made, the mission has to be restarted. Survivor continues the Souls-like principles, a challenging combat system and branching locations with shortcuts and bonfires where the player respawns after death, then has to go to the enemy who killed them to reclaim accumulated experience. Meanwhile, Survivor is much more beginner-friendly compared to other Souls-like games. You can even adjust the difficulty level. Death's Door. A highly acclaimed indie project with significantly streamlined but still Souls-like elements. Here, we play as a crow undertaking tasks as a reaper. One day, a thief steals one of the souls you guard and hides in a world filled with ancient monsters. To retrieve the soul and restore order, you embark on a pursuit. The game style is reminiscent of Studio Ghibli's works, but in a 3D format. Unconventional puzzles, well-developed characters, and an engaging, albeit simplified combat system can captivate players. Due to its moderate difficulty and soothing design, Death's Door can serve as that doorway to the world of Souls-like games for newcomers. Asterigos: Curse of the Stars. A more cartoonish and vibrant version of Souls-like based on the mythology of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Hilda, the main heroine of the game, embarks on a journey to the abandoned city of Aphis to find her father. There, she encounters various monsters, each capable of seriously testing her abilities. One of the key features of the game is the combat system, which allows you to combine different melee and ranged weapons. This gives the opportunity to form your own play style, try different builds, and change weapons to adapt to different situations. The battles here are not as challenging as in other Souls-like games, but it won't be a walk in the park either. Bleak Faith Forsaken, another action game reminiscent of Dark Souls. The events of the game unfold in a dying world where only memories remain of the former civilization, and the main character must explore monster-infested areas to uncover the secrets of their past. The project is characterized by inventive monster design and hardcore combat that motivates active movement around the arena, memorizing attack timings and boss behavior patterns, as well as managing available resources. In addition, the game boasts a memorable soundtrack that deepens the atmosphere of the apocalypse. Steelrising, an action game in the spirit of Dark Souls, where the setting of a suffering medieval era has been replaced by the period of the French Revolution with a touch of clockpunk. In the lead role is the automaton Aegis, who must traverse the fire-ravaged Paris to defeat Louis XVI's mechanical army. This game stands out with its unusual visual design, dynamic combat, and an intricately woven plot with interesting twists. The game world consists of a series of multi-layered locations with secret passages and shortcuts. Colossal bosses force tactical adaptation to their devastating attacks, and diverse weapons allow choosing different roles from agile dancer to heavy warrior. Moonscars, a colorless, almost black-and-white action game with pixel graphics and a dark fantasy aesthetic. Moonscars is a game about battling bloodthirsty monsters where each death serves as a lesson for the player, and the combat system requires careful study of enemy behavior and mastering various techniques. Genre-wise, it's a 2D Metroidvania where the hero travels through a branching world, gains new abilities, and discovers new locations. If you're looking for a game that surpasses Dark Souls in the atmosphere of darkness and hopelessness, this is exactly what you need. Morbid. The developers of this game were clearly inspired by Lovecraftian nightmares, resulting in a world that is bloody, filled with occult disciplines and ancient, mind-bending gods. The protagonist has an additional sanity scale due to the Lovecraftian influence. Story-wise, the project is somewhat reminiscent of the first Blood Omen. The protagonist travels through a distorted world to find and overthrow the 7 acolytes possessed by the parasitic gods, the Gahars. In Morbid, there's an isometric view, excellent pixel graphics, a great soundtrack, all enemies are uncompromisingly brutal, and all bosses and mini-bosses are extremely challenging. The large, expansive world is full of stories, secrets, and loot. Players can expect perks, runes, dozens of types of weapons, and stamina management battles. Ender Lilies, a 2D role-playing game in the dark fantasy style, set in a mysterious kingdom that has fallen into decay due to a mysterious rain turning all living creatures into bloodthirsty monsters. Players control Lily, the last of the priestesses endowed with the gift of dispelling corruption. Since Lily is not trained in combat, she is protected by the spirit of a knight. Gameplay-wise and even stylistically, the game is largely similar to Hollow Knight, except for the visual component that draws inspiration from anime. Players explore labyrinthine levels, engage in combat using magic and melee, encounter dangerous bosses, and use special relics that allow them to adapt their playstyle. Lies of P, arguably the best Souls-like of all time, Lies of P is a dark and twisted retelling of the Pinocchio story, set in the industrial city of Krat. The streets are overrun by mechanical marionettes, a mysterious illness has affected the residents, and you are awakened by a mysterious voice from the darkness begging for help. The combat is gripping, the variety of weapons and customization possibilities are fantastic, boss battles are challenging yet rewarding, and the narrative and setting strike the perfect balance of ambiguity and intrigue reminiscent of FromSoftware. This is undoubtedly the highest quality Souls-like game, closely resembling the storytelling and gameplay of FromSoftware's iconic titles while possessing its own individuality. If you have even a slight affinity for this genre, you must explore this game. Elden Ring. Arguably the most prominent and popular Souls-like game was created by none other than FromSoftware, the same minds behind the original Dark Souls. In 2022, Elden Ring became the Game of the Year and firmly secured its place in the ranks of the greatest titles of all time. Despite Elden Ring's story unfolding in a world unrelated to the studio's previous games, and with George Martin contributing to the narrative, the storytelling methods remained unchanged. Players once again venture into a dark, enigmatic universe to overcome local demigods and their minions, seize the shards of the Elden Ring, and restore balance to the interstice. The combat mechanics and core principles of Souls-like were complemented by the expanses of an open world, a trusty steed, replenishing flasks, and complete freedom to choose where to go and whom to face. Elden Ring has evolved the genre, significantly lowered the entry barrier, but retained its hardcore and appealing nature. That's it. Image Game Channel has been with you. Have a nice day.